And so heading into 2026, are Trek bikes still worth it? What's up you guys, Mo Awesome from Awesome MTB. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another bike review. Today's video is actually very special because we have been reviewing bikes for a very long time and I've been riding even longer than that. And somehow up until this point, I have never ridden a Trek bike. It has been a very long time since I've spent time on a bike from a brand that I haven't ridden any of their bikes. So I need to give a huge thank you to Cycle Limited for making this video possible. More on that later on, but this is actually a pre-owned bike. So the build is gonna be a little bit different than a stock Trek Slash 9.8 build. And once again, we'll talk more about that later. So what is the Trek Slash? Well, we have 170 millimeters of travel up front with 170 millimeters of travel in the rear. So a ton of travel in this enduro rig, and we do have a high pivot suspension design. So we got the pulleys on there. You guys know that I spent some time on a high pivot with the GT. I fell in love with it a little bit there, and I've fallen more in love with the high pivot on the Trek Slash. I actually think I prefer this high pivot suspension platform. We'll talk more about that later on. Now up front, we do have a RockShox Zeb Ultimate. In the rear, we do have a RockShox Vivid. For the drivetrain, we have a Shimano XT 1x12 drivetrain. For brakes, we have Shimano XTR brakes. We have an alloy Bontrager handlebar as well as stem setup. Now for wheels, we do have a Bontrager alloy wheel setup on here, and tires, we have an, I believe, RSL Galbraith up front and an RSL Brevard in the rear. Never actually heard of this tire company before riding this bike. Now once again, this bike has a ton of travel and it also has the Geo to match it. We have a head angle that's in about the 63-degree range, and it also has a little bit of a longer wheelbase as well as rear chainstay. This bike has been insanely stable out on the trails, and when you pair it with the high pivot suspension platform, it has been absolutely insane how much fun the Trek Slash is out on the trails. And I can't believe, similar to the Specialized Enduro, that it took me this long to spend time on the Trek Slash platform. Now, a couple of different adjustments you can make with the Trek Slash. You could change the head angle via headset cups, and you also have a rear chip in here if you want to go between mullet and 29 to adjust the Geo slightly. This bike actually came spec 29-29. I'm happy it did that way because you guys know I'm not that big of a fan of the mullet setups, and I absolutely love the Trek Slash setup as a proper 29. So right now we're actually gonna hit the trails to show you guys my first experience riding a Trek Slash. Once again, it's not too often that I get to have a first ride on a brand's bike, especially one as big as Trek. I still can't believe that this was my first time testing out a Trek. And after it, we're gonna talk about what I absolutely loved about the Trek Slash and some things that I didn't necessarily love. Now, before we go for that ride, I do wanna give a huge thank you to the people that made this video possible, and that is Cycle Limited.
Cycle Limited is your go-to online retailer for certified pre-owned bikes and gear, all at unbeatable prices. They work directly with manufacturers to offer the best deals on top-tier road, MTB, gravel, and e-bikes, plus parts and accessories. Every pre-owned bike is professionally inspected, tuned, and ready to ride. They also are able to get direct manufacturer pricing, so there's no middle person, just great deal on new bike parts. Once again, not only can you get an insane deal on bikes, but they're also shipped within the same day. The bikes come very well packaged, and you can have them built up in no time. It's awesome seeing how much care they put into packaging their bikes, and these bikes are exactly how the listing shows them. In addition to fast and secure shipping, they also offer hassle-free returns, and international shipping is coming soon. They have a rad bike quiz finder on their website as well, and it is an awesome way to narrow down their huge selection of available bikes to figure out what works for you and your price point. Cycle Limited also owns every bike they sell, ensuring top-tier quality and a worry-free buying experience. Once again, some of the deals on their site on certified pre-owned as well as new bikes are awesome right now, and I will go ahead and link them in the description.
Once again, you guys, this bike came exactly how the photo showed it on Cycle Limited's website, and it was also very easy to assemble out of the box, and everything felt dialed out on the trails. I was actually very impressed by the mechanic side of this bike. It felt like everything was very well taken care of, and it's cool that Cycle Limited provides a safe place to buy used bikes and also have the confidence knowing that you're getting exactly what you're buying. Like I said, Cycle Limited has some insane deals on their website. I'm gonna go ahead and link them in the description of this video, some of my favorite deals, so be sure to check it out. Huge thank you to Cycle Limited for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get into the ride. Hey guys, welcome back to another bike review. Today, we have a very special video because once again, this is my first time ever on a Trek bike. It's the Trek Slash. The first thing that's very apparent to me right off the back is how comfortable that seated pedaling position is. You can definitely tell a steep seat angle on this, which is gonna be appreciated when it gets steep. I would also say a little bit more efficient than I thought this bike was gonna be, especially looking at how beefy the suspension was. I will say the bike has a very good pop to it. And like I said, pretty impressed at the efficiency being a 170 millimeter travel bike with a Vivid. This is gonna be kind of pedal central right here. You really gotta time every pedal stroke as we head into some of this chunk. Something I am noticing, even though the Slash has a really good pep in its step on these climbs, traction is awesome. That bottom bracket feels pretty low. I'm curious of the actual numbers. This is kind of the ultimate test for traction, probably the loosest climb. And we're gonna see where the Slash stacks up. So far, absolutely glued to the ground. Once again, I do think high pivot and the desert makes a lot of sense. I'm surprised to see in Pivot's lineup, they don't have an enduro bike with a high pivot suspension platform. Obviously, I don't know how that would coincide with DW Link, but I feel like out here, it just makes so much sense. Traction really does need to be optimized. Now, once again, I am feeling that low BB. Definitely feel it. Now, another thing I'm feeling is the weight, but I have a ton of traction. Very well balanced geo on the climb, and then powering up that, ton of traction, just a little bit heavier of a bike to get up that. And overall, liking those longer stays. I always love longer chain stays, especially on looser climbs. We have our first little bit of downhill here, and this is where, if I have a feeling, it's gonna blow me away. And that bottom bracket height is gonna make a lot of sense, and I can tell it does. It has such a stable feeling to it. We are gonna be heading down National, but I like to start up here. Locals only feature, and no issues for the Slash. I could tell it's gonna be an insane descent. A little bit of a drop right here. Oh my God, the stability though from that BB and those longer stays. Sections like this for traction, very needed. Have a good one. This is a good bottom bracket test. Right over the chunk. Oh, bottom bracket hit there. Like I said, very stable on the descents. A lot of that stability coming from that lower BB. This will be interesting. A lot of timing pedals here. Making our way up. Still clipping every now and then. How's it going? We're just gonna make our way through here. Have a good one. Now those tight twisty sections, like I said, slack head angle, you just need to kind of think about it a little bit more so ahead of time. Slash just eating it up, that head angle feeling very at home here. Once again, this is the more aggressive section of downhill. Now this will be interesting. It's very tight and it's an XL. No issues, surprisingly. I actually managed that very well, and I would attribute a lot of that to having that pop to get up on that wall. Once again, this is probably one of the more playful, active suspension platforms, if that makes sense. And coming into here while focusing, need every bit of focus. It is chunky. You don't want to go over. And I would say the Trek blowing me away in terms of capability. I am loving how this feels. The thing I am starting to notice, how's it going? That BB height feeling so at home out here. And I would say truly insane how stable this bike feels. Where we really got to time everything. We're going to try and go wide here and then slot into this. No issues for the Slash. That almost felt easy, which is kind of insane given how crazy this trail is. And overall, I am loving the confidence that Slash is providing. That's a bit of chunk to make it out of here. The Slash blowing me away this ride. And I truly think one of the most confident yet peppy bike I've tested in a while. Let's get back and talk about it.
All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that ride out here in South Mountain, Arizona. What an amazing place to test bikes, and the Trek Slash felt at home right away. Now, the first thing that I absolutely loved about the Trek Slash was that suspension platform. I actually think that this is gonna be in my top 3 favorite suspension platforms. It was pretty insane how much traction there was on the descents and the climbs, followed with how the bike still had a good pep in the step. Once again, this is a 170 millimeter enduro rig, 63-ish degree head angle. This thing was not supposed to be as alive feeling on the climbs, but it was. The efficiency was there, but at the same time too, it also felt like a true high pivot suspension platform. It felt like the traction on the descents was pretty insane. The bike stayed glued to the ground, and you got that quiet feeling that I have grown to appreciate from high pivot bikes. And yeah, I truly think that what Trek has done with this high pivot suspension platform is pretty insane. Another thing that I absolutely loved about this bike, and it goes back to that suspension platform, was the climbing profile. I thought the efficiency was there and had a very good pep in its step. And overall, even though the bike itself was so aggressive geo-wise, it didn't feel like the bike wandered too much on the climbs. The only downside on the climbs was the overall bike weight. You do feel that. But it's also impressive with that bike weight how much efficiency there was, especially when you put the power down. Another thing that I loved about the Trek Slash was obviously the downhill. It is insane how confident inspiring the Trek Slash is. It just has, once again, a very good blend of both confidence while still staying playful. And it is pretty insane that you could say the word playful with a 170mm enduro bike with a 63-degree head angle. Nothing about how this bike looks screams that it should stay playful, but you do get that playful pop in and out of corners. Once again, that suspension design is pretty insane there. But at the same time too, when you want the suspension to hook up and the bike to track, it tracks, and the geo itself is so stable to where you really do feel like you have unlimited confidence, especially on high-speed straightaways. Now, what are some things I didn't necessarily love about the Trek Slash? I would say there wasn't too much. The first thing would probably be if you're a rider out there that you don't necessarily need all of that travel, or you don't need that geo, because that geo is very aggressive. Once again, when you start getting down into the 63s for the head angle, tight, twisty sections of trails, you do have to put a little bit more thought into your line choice. Overall, I would say if you're not gonna be riding the most aggressive downhills, you might wanna bump down the travel and maybe go a little bit more conservative on the geo. That is something to keep in mind. And also the bike weight, obviously the high pivot suspension platform, all of the travel, the beefy suspension, the bike weight is a little bit more on the heavier side, and you do feel that on climbs. So if you have any sustained climbs, that might be something you want to consider. And so heading into 2026, are Trek bikes still worth it? And I would say this is gonna be a very interesting question. I will say after spending time on the Trek Slash, I was actually pretty impressed by the overall bike, and it makes me think, what other bikes do they have in their lineup that I wanna spend some time on? I could tell that they have been designing bikes for a long time. The suspension design on here, I definitely think is probably what blew me away the most. I was expecting this bike to be a drag on the uphills, but the fact that they were able to tune this bike to have a ton of traction, but still have a pep in its step when it came time for acceleration, that was pretty insane to me. The last thing that I expected to say about the Trek Slash was that it feels like a playful enduro bike, but it does. It feels like a very playful enduro bike that still has the ability to ride very aggressive terrain. And yeah, huge shout out to the Trek engineering team. I was blown away by the performance of the bike. Once again, their experience in designing bikes was very apparent hopping on the Trek Slash. If I'm being totally transparent, I do appreciate smaller companies. Once again, I've been riding mountain bikes for about 15 years now. I don't think I have a single friend or even mutual friend that works at Trek Bikes. That's how big of a corporation they are. For me personally, I just like a little bit smaller bike brands, and not too small. I'm talking about like brands like Ibis, Pivot, Yeti, where you can clearly see the story there. I'm sure Trek has a ton of awesome employees out there, and I really do want to learn more about that brand, but I don't know, I just like the more fanboy aspect of supporting small bike brands. It just kind of feels a little bit more community oriented. For some people, they might not care at all. They just might be looking for the best deal on a bike, and there are some insane deals on the Trek Slash. Once again, Cycle Limited has mind-blowing deals on their website. I'm gonna go ahead and link all of the cool deals in the description of this video. But yeah, to summarize things up, I think the Trek Slash was pretty insane. I can't believe it has taken me this long to ride a Trek bike. It is clear that they know what they're doing when it comes to bike design. Very impressive with the Trek Slash 9.8. Huge thank you to Cycle Limited for making this video possible. If you guys have any questions about the Trek Slash, let me know in the comment section. And until next time, you guys, ride awesome. You.